Chapter 3. The Lauriston Gardens Mystery. I confess I was startled by this fresh proof of my companion's theories. My respect for his analytical powers increased tremendously. However, a small suspicion remained in my mind that the whole episode had been prearranged to dazzle me, though I couldn't imagine why he would bother. When I looked at him, he had finished reading the note, and his eyes had regained that vacant, faraway look. "How on earth did you deduce that?" I asked. "Deduce what?" he asked irritably. "That he was a retired sergeant of Marines." "I have no time for trifles," he snapped. Then, with a smile, added, "Excuse my rudeness. You broke my train of thought. But perhaps it's just as well. So you really couldn't see that he was a Marine sergeant?" "No, I couldn't." "It was easier to know it than to explain how. If someone asked you to prove that 2 and 2 make 4, you might find it hard, yet you are certain of the fact." Even from across the street, I saw a large blue anchor tattooed on the back of his hand. That suggested the sea. He had a military posture, however, and regulation sideburns. "There is your Marine." He also carried himself with an air of command. You must have noticed how he held his head and swung his cane. He looked like a steady, respectable, middle-aged man. All facts that led me to believe he had been a sergeant. "Amazing!" I exclaimed. "Commonplace," said Holmes, though he looked pleased by my admiration. "I said earlier that there were no criminals. It seems I was wrong. Look at this." He tossed me the note the messenger had brought. "This is terrible," I cried as I read it. "It does seem unusual," he remarked calmly. "Would you mind reading it aloud?" This is the letter I read to him. "My dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, there has been a bad business during the night at 3 Lauriston Gardens off Brixton Road. Our officer on patrol saw a light there around 2 in the morning. Since the house was empty, he suspected something was wrong. He found the door open, and in the front room, he discovered the body of a well-dressed gentleman. In his pocket were cards with the name Enoch J. Drebber, Cleveland, Ohio, USA. There was no robbery, and there is no evidence as to how the man died. There is blood in the room, but no wound on the body. We are at a loss as to how he entered the empty house. The whole affair is a puzzle. If you can come to the house before noon, you will find me there. I have left everything exactly as it was found. If you cannot come, I will send more details, and I would value your opinion. Yours faithfully, Tobias Gregson." "Gregson is the smartest of the Scotland Yard detectives," Holmes remarked. "He and Lestrade are the best of a bad lot. They are quick and energetic, but shockingly conventional. They are also incredibly jealous of each other. This case will be interesting if they are both on the trail." I was amazed at his calm tone. "There isn't a moment to lose," I cried. "Should I go and call a cab?" "I'm not sure if I'll go. I'm incredibly lazy when the mood strikes me, though I can be active enough at other times. But this is exactly the chance you've been waiting for." "My dear fellow, what does it matter to me? Even if I solve the whole thing, Gregson and Lestrade will get all the credit. That is the fate of an unofficial specialist. But he is begging for your help." "Yes. He knows I am his superior and admits it to me, but he would rather cut his tongue out than admit it to anyone else. Still, we might as well go and have a look. I'll work it out on my own. At the very least, I might get a laugh at their expense." "Come on." He threw on his overcoat, suddenly full of energy. "Get your hat," he said. "You want me to come?" "Yes, if you have nothing better to do." A minute later, we were in a cab, driving fast toward Brixton Road. It was a foggy, cloudy morning. A gray veil hung over the rooftops. reflecting the mud-colored streets below. Holmes was in high spirits and chatted away about violins and the differences between rare instruments. I remained silent. The gloomy weather and the grim business ahead depressed me. "You don't seem to be thinking much about the case," I said finally, interrupting his musical lecture. "No data yet," he answered. "It is a major mistake to theorize before you have all the evidence. It biases the judgment." "You'll have your data soon," I remarked, pointing ahead. "This is Brixton Road, and that is the house." "So it is. Stop, driver, stop." We were still 100 yards away, but he insisted we get out and finish the journey on foot. Number 3 Lauriston Gardens looked ominous. It was one of 4 houses set back from the street. 2 were occupied and 2 were empty. The empty ones had blank, melancholy windows with "To Let" signs stuck to the glass like cataracts. A small garden with sickly plants separated the house from the street, crossed by a narrow, yellowish path of clay and gravel. The ground was very muddy from the night's rain. A low brick wall surrounded the garden, and a sturdy police officer leaned against it, watched by a small group of curious onlookers. I expected Holmes to rush into the house immediately. Instead, he lounged on the sidewalk with an air of indifference that seemed almost forced. He gazed at the ground, the sky, and the opposite houses. Then he walked slowly down the path, or rather, along the edge of the grass, keeping his eyes fixed on the ground. Twice he stopped, and once I saw him smile and heard a cry of satisfaction. There were many footprints in the wet clay, but since the police had been walking over them, I didn't see how he could learn anything. Still, I trusted his sharp perception. At the door, we were met by Gregson, a tall, pale man with a notebook. He rushed forward and shook Holmes's hand. "It's kind of you to come," he said. "I've left everything untouched." "Except for the path," Holmes replied, pointing to the mud. "If a herd of buffalo had passed through, it couldn't be more of a mess." "I assume you reached your own conclusions, Gregson, before you allowed that." "I had so much to do inside," the detective said evasively. "My colleague, Mr. Lestrade, is here. I relied on him to watch the outside." Holmes glanced at me and raised his eyebrows sarcastically. "With 2 men like you and Lestrade on the case, there won't be much left for me to find," he said. Gregson rubbed his hands, looking self-satisfied. "We've done all we can, but it's a strange case, and I know you like such things." "Did you come in a cab?" Holmes asked. "No, sir." "Did Lestrade?" "No, sir." "Then let us look at the room." Holmes strode into the house, leaving a confused Gregson behind. A dusty passage led to the dining room where the body lay. I followed Holmes with a heavy heart. It was a large, empty, square room, made to look even larger by the lack of furniture. Vulgar, peeling wallpaper covered the walls, and a thick layer of dust coated everything. On the mantelpiece of the fireplace sat a stump of a red wax candle. My attention was fixed on the grim, motionless figure on the floor. It was a man about 44 years old, broad-shouldered, with dark curly hair and a stubby beard. He wore a heavy frock coat and light trousers. Beside him lay a well-brushed top hat. His hands were clenched and his face was twisted in an expression of horror and hatred. I have seen death in many forms, but never more terrifying than in that dark, grimy room. Lestrade was standing by the door and greeted us. "This case will cause a stir, sir," he said. "It beats anything I've ever seen." "No clues?" Gregson asked. "None at all," Lestrade replied. Holmes knelt by the body and examined it intently. "You are sure there is no wound?" he asked, pointing to the splashes of blood around the room. "Positive!" both detectives cried. "Then this blood belongs to someone else, presumably the murderer," Holmes said. "It reminds me of a case in Utrecht in 1834. Do you remember it, Gregson?" "No, sir." "You should read up on it. There is nothing new under the sun. It has all been done before." As he spoke, his fingers flew everywhere, feeling, unbuttoning, and examining. Finally, he sniffed the dead man's lips and looked at the soles of his boots. "He hasn't been moved?" he asked. "No more than necessary for our exam." "You can take him to the morgue now," Holmes said. "There's nothing more to learn." As they lifted the body, a ring fell and rolled across the floor. Lestrade grabbed it. "There's been a woman here," he cried. "It's a woman's wedding ring." "This complicates things," Gregson said. "Are you sure it doesn't simplify them?" Holmes remarked. "What did you find in his pockets?" Gregson pointed to a pile of items. A gold watch, a heavy gold chain, a Masonic ring, a gold pin with rubies, a Russian leather card case for Enoch J. Drebber, and some loose money. Also a book with the name Joseph Stangerson inside, and 2 letters for Drebber and Stangerson from a steamship company. It seems he was about to return to New York. "Have you looked for Stangerson?" "I've sent out advertisements and checked the American Exchange," Gregson said, "but no luck yet." Holmes chuckled and was about to speak when Lestrade reappeared from the front room, looking very proud of himself. "Mr. Gregson," he said, "I have made a discovery that would have been overlooked without a careful search of the walls." He led us into the room and struck a match. "Look at that!" In a corner, where the wallpaper had peeled, a single word was scrawled in blood-red letters, R-A-C-H-E. "The murderer wrote it in blood," Lestrade said triumphantly. "It proves it wasn't suicide, and look at the candle. This corner was the brightest part of the room when it was lit. He wanted it to be seen." "And what does it mean?" Gregson asked. "Mean? It means the writer was going to write the name Rachel, but was interrupted. Mark my words, a woman named Rachel is involved in this." Holmes burst into a fit of laughter, which offended the little detective. "I beg your pardon," Holmes said. "You get the credit for finding it. Now, with your permission, I will examine the room." He pulled out a tape measure and a magnifying glass and moved noiselessly around the room, kneeling and even lying flat on the floor. For 20 minutes, he measured distances I couldn't see and gathered a small pile of gray dust into an envelope. Finally, he examined the word on the wall with extreme care. "They say genius is an infinite capacity for taking pains," he remarked with a smile. "It's a bad definition, but it applies to detective work." "What do you think of it, sir?" the detectives asked. "I wouldn't want to rob you of the credit," Holmes said sarcastically. "You are doing so well, but I would like to speak to the officer who found the body. John Rance, right?" Lestrade gave him the address. "Come along, doctor," Holmes said to me. Then he turned back to the detectives. "I'll tell you one thing. It was murder, and the murderer was a man. He was over 6 feet tall, in his prime, with small feet for his height. He wore square-toed boots and smoked a Trichinopoly cigar. He arrived in a 4-wheeled cab with a horse that had 3 old shoes and 1 new one. He likely has a red face and very long fingernails on his right hand. Just a few hints for you." Lestrade and Gregson smiled skeptically. "If he was murdered, how was it done?" "Poison," Holmes said shortly as he walked out. "And one more thing, Lestrade. Rach is the German word for revenge. Don't waste your time looking for a Miss Rachel." He walked away, leaving the 2 rivals standing there in stunned silence.